be here once again. This is part 2 of the trilogy. So it's great to be here with you. I'm joined on screen by Avi. Avi's actually sitting right next to me, but he's on his own device there. So we are going to be tag teaming, and we're going to be taking you through the session where we're going to be giving you quite a nice taste of Excel 202. And Tracy mentioned a picture that speaks 1,000 words, and being able to visualize your data and making sense of your data and illustrating what's actually going on in the numbers in a visual way and telling a story. And that's really what Excel 202 is all about. We can't tell that story. We can't put a chart and a beautiful picture together to tell that story unless our data is clean. Isn't that right, Avi?
Absolutely. One of the really important steps that we take in Excel 202 before we start analyzing and summarizing and manipulating our data, we spend some time tidying up the data. Just in case anyone is unaware, what we're doing over these 3 weeks is a taste of our full Excel courses. So we've got 3 full Excel courses. Each course is roughly about 8 hours of content. So we're not going through everything from our 3 courses, but really just a taste. If there is an interest and a need, after we've done these 3 sessions in enrolling in our full Excel courses, you can obviously chat to us. We'll be offering a very, very generous discount. What I did want to add as well is that our intention is not to go at a very, very fast pace, as Tracy mentioned. Our intention is actually to go at a very comfortable, easy pace, where we take it slowly and we do it step by step. If you do feel like we're going too fast, you're more than welcome to pop a message in the chat. But it really is our intention to go at a nice, comfortable, easy pace. What I do also want to add is that it's important to follow along. Okay. You can learn a little bit by watching, but you are primarily going to learn through doing. Okay, isn't that right?
Absolutely. So first prize is if you're actually following along with us. If that's not possible, depending on your current situation where you're sitting and what device you're on, that's okay. It's definitely better than nothing to actually sit and watch. You might be just on your smartphone, for example, and just watching this and unable to actually work with us on Excel as we go, but that's okay. In that case, then the next best prize is actually to watch the recording on an actual computer and to practice along with us and download the spreadsheet. And speaking of downloads, a couple of minutes ago, I put in a link, a Dropbox link into the chat. Please click on that link and download the zip file. If you're having any issues downloading that zip file, then we can actually drop the Excel spreadsheet into the chat. And I think, Avi, maybe just do that anyway, just so that you can download the Excel file. And that Excel file is actually the file at the end of last week's session. So last Tuesday, the 6th of September, we did session 1 of this trilogy, and we ended off with a spreadsheet that we had built. And what we're going to do is we're going to open that up. So thank you, Avi. There's the zipped file, and Philip, you and maybe some other people will be cut off at 10 o'clock with load shedding. And if that is the case, then you'll see the first hour, and then the last half an hour, you can watch the recording. The show will go on. I hope, Avi, we've got it back up here, so we should be good. And then the recording will be the full hour and a half, which will be made available to you. All right, so the show will go on. Les, Dropbox is a cloud storage and sharing platform. You don't need to worry about what exactly it is and how it works. You just need to click on the link and you should be able to download the file. You don't need to start downloading apps as well. You should be able to just download the actual spreadsheet in that zipped folder from that Dropbox link. If that's a problem, then just click on the actual zipped file. And Avi, please drop just the Excel file into the chat as well, just to make things extra simple. That we don't have a zipped file, that we just have the Excel spreadsheet. That's all we need really for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen to show you what that Excel file looks like. I'm going to share my entire screen. All right. So that's my inbox. Okay. And this is, let's also hide the floating meeting controls. That's a good trick when you're sharing your screen in Zoom. And I'm going to hide my thumbnail videos, try to get that out of the way as well. I'm only on one screen today. Avi and I are actually down in Cape Town. Yes, Avi.
Just to add very briefly, I'm now viewing on my computer what Dan is doing over there next to me. So Dan has now shared his screen. So now, by default on my screen, Dan's Excel goes into full screen mode. That's the default. Okay, so you should be seeing Dan's Excel screen, his shared screen in full screen mode. If it's not, double click on that window which has Dan's Excel in, and it should go into full screen mode. Go.
Good, good, good. And then, Avi, maybe just to touch on for a moment about the settings when you're viewing someone else's screen, that you could go into like side-by-side mode, just to make it easier. And guys, when you're seeing somebody's shared screen, it depends on what device you're on. It depends whether you're on a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop or a desktop. The viewing experience is somewhat different. So depending on what device you're on, play around with the settings. You might have this green thing at the top which says you are viewing Dan Stillerman's screen, and then you might get more or 3 buttons. I can move this here and I can click on more, and you can see that you can just go through the different settings. Okay, so are you seeing my floating controls up at the top?
No, we don't see it.
Oh, you don't see it. Okay, I thought you see everything on my entire screen, but let me just hide this over here. And yeah, guys, so just play around with your settings. All right, so I think I was talking to Avi this morning over a morning coffee, and we said we thought it would be useful to go through for about 5 minutes maximum a brief recap of last week's session. I think that some of you might not have attended last week, some of you attended, but you need a bit of a recap and a little refresh. And essentially, we're building on what we did last week. So we think it's in everyone's best interest to actually run through what we did, but to do it briefly, because we don't want to spend the entire day today recapping what we did last week, because we obviously have new content to get through. So what have we got here? We've got a sheet called data. We've got columns which say number, and we've got, if we press control and the down arrow, and once again, the same as last week, between me and Avi, one of us will be talking and presenting, and one of us will be sharing the shortcuts into the chat. So you can hear us saying what the shortcut is, you can see us doing the shortcut, and you can have a reference of it in the chat. All right. In addition, if you downloaded that zipped file, then that will include the keyboard shortcuts cheat sheets. So I'm going to open up the keyboard shortcuts for Windows, because I'm using Excel on Windows here. I'm going to put that to the side there. I'm going to use a nice keyboard shortcut in this case, which is Control L, which takes me into full screen in my PDF. And this is great because this is our keyboard shortcut cheat sheet. It's a 2-pager, and it's got a whole lot of keyboard shortcuts that can help you to work smart and to get ahead. And you can print this out. You can print it back to back, double-sided. You can print it out in color. You can laminate it. You can stick it on your pinboard. You can keep it with you in your laptop bag. And it will really, really help you significantly to start adopting these keyboard shortcuts. All right, so let's zoom in. How do I zoom in? I hold down Control on my keyboard, and then I scroll with this scroll wheel on the mouse. Here we're going to admit that person who's just come into the waiting room. I'm going to hide these once again, and I'm going to zoom in with Control and the wheel on the mouse to see what is the first shortcut on our cheat sheet. Control and the arrow keys, the different arrow keys, left, right, up, and down. How do I get back to Excel? I press Alt and Tab. Alt and Tab lets me toggle between applications that are open. You can see I've got Excel, I've got Outlook, I've got Google Chrome, I've got Zoom, I've got WhatsApp. I've got a number of different applications, and I can toggle just by pressing Alt and Tab. So that's really, really useful. These are Windows shortcuts that are extremely useful when you are using anything on your computer. So that's why we are emphasizing them. We mentioned them last week, and we're mentioning them and repeating them again today. All right, so Control and the arrow keys, really useful. Look at me, I'm bouncing around my data from corner to corner, side to side, top to bottom. Control and the arrow keys, practice that and start to use that. All right. So we see that we've got a list from 1 to 30. We also have dates, and we have months, we have days of the week, we've got revenue ex-VAT, then we put in the VAT amount. If you remember from last week, we actually put the 15% VAT rate for South Africa over there. And then what we did was we referenced it with the dollar symbols. All right, so we said, we started off with this cell over here, and we said it's E2, and that's 1,000, and we multiplied by K1, and then we locked it because otherwise when we pulled it down, it changed to K2, K3, K4. So what I'm going to do very briefly is I'm going to insert a new tab, a new sheet. I click there. I'm going to take note of these floating meeting control. That's actually Control Alt Shift and H to hide them, which is quite a finger twister. Control Alt Shift and H. There we go. And because people are joining the waiting room, it keeps popping up, but it's all good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build this list from 1 to 30. Let's not spend too much time. Remember, we've got lots of new content to cover. It is useful to go through this. I enter 1 and then 2. And then what I do is I select the 2 of these. Drag down with my full handle. We call it the overachiever in our Excel 101 course. And there we go. We've now got a list from 1 to 30. All right, if I want to go to the other sheet tab, I can just click, or I can use Control Page Up or Control Page Down to navigate between the different sheet tabs. So what did I want in the cell next door? I want today's date. Now you'll see last week it was indeed the 6th of September. So when we press Control and semicolon, it updates it to today's date. So it's a week later, it's the 13th of September. I press Enter. I can drag down on the bottom right-hand corner, or what we showed you last week is to double click. And notice I get 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So it's day by day by day. And I get this little autofill options pop up here. And instead of filling the series, I can actually say I want weekdays only. I want it to skip over the weekend. So it's going to skip over the 17th and 18th, and it's just going to be weekdays. If I go back to the data sheet, what was next? It was the month. So what is the month that's relevant to today's date? It's September. And when I drag down to here, it's changing the month, and I actually wanted to copy it. So instead of filling a series, I go back to this autofill options and I say copy cells. And then from this number over here, that's the 3rd of October. So I'm going to say Oct, and I can double click. It's going to go all the way down, but I want to once again copy the cells. All right. So notice that we're going obviously at a much faster pace, but we are just whizzing through this as a recap. And remember, you can watch the recording of last week as well as this week to refresh. All right. So now we want day of the week. So what is today? Today, once again, is Tuesday, same as last week's session. And I can double click down, but it's including the weekend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say full weekdays so that it corresponds. It skips over Saturday and Sunday. All right, after that, we had revenue, we had 1,000. And when we drag 1,000 down, what do we get? We get it staying on 1,000. So it's copied that cell down. But if we wanted to fill a series, we click full series and it goes to 1,001, 1,002, etc. Okay, and then we had the VAT rate. So what did we do in the previous sheet? We went to J1 and we said VAT rate is there. So let's type that in quickly, VAT rate SA, and we put in 15%. And then we said equals 1,000 multiplied by K1. And when we drag down, we see the problem. We see that in the next cell, it's K2. That's what I was saying a couple of minutes ago. And you can see that's why we need to anchor it or lock it or use absolute references. Those are the dollar signs. So we click there on K1. We press F4 on our keyboard. It puts in $1 before the K to lock the column reference, and it puts in $1 before the 1 to lock the row reference. Don't worry too much about that. The main thing is that there's $2 symbols, which locks in that reference. All right. So when we then drag down, there we go. You can see the difference. The blue cell gets dragged down. E1 becomes E2, E3, E4, etc. But K1 stays K1, K1, K1. If I want to see all of them, I can press Control and tilde, which is to the left of the number 1 on the keyboard. That's a really useful keyboard shortcut. Abby's going to put it in the chat. Control and tilde. There's also a squiggle above the tilde. The tilde is it's the key that has the backward looking apostrophe, backward leaning apostrophe, as well as a squiggle. And if we press that, look what happens. We actually see that we've got a view of every single cell. That's fantastic. That gives us a view of what's actually going on beneath the surface. We often call it X-ray goggles because we actually get to see what's happening beneath the surface of these cells. And I can press the same keyboard shortcut to get out of that mode. And then what we did was we said, if that's the revenue X VAT, and then we've got the VAT, we want to add them together. We say equals cell E1 plus cell F1. All right. And we get the revenue including VAT. We double click down and there we go. Now, we also said that we want to include column headings. So how do we do that? We insert a row up at the top. All right, how do we do that? We press Shift and Spacebar, and then we press Control, Shift, and equals, which is Control, Shift, plus. We are adding in a row. So we press Control Shift equals, we type number, NO, then we press tab, then that's the date column, then we press tab again, that's the month column, that's the day column, that's the revenue X VAT, that's the VAT amount, and that is the revenue including VAT. All right, we also said that we could format these column headings. So we can start at A1, we can press Shift to the right, or we can press Control and Shift right. Control and Shift right arrow, select all the headings. We can make them bold. And we wait for Excel to load.
And while it's loading, what I'm actually thinking is, what if there's a way to avoid all of this manual formatting?
Ah, good point, Avi.
What if there's a way to introduce Excel 202 with a much more efficient way of formatting our data in our table?
Good question, Avi. So we're actually going to look at that, and that's a great point. And what if there's a way to avoid Excel not responding? That would be great, because now it's hanging, and what we can do as an antidote or a remedy against this is we can continuously save our work. Now, fortunately, I've got all our work in already saved in the data sheet. This was just a recap. So if we happen to lose this, it's okay. But there we go. It actually just loaded, but that's a good reminder. Sometimes you need a little nudge, a little reminder to always save your work, constantly saving our work. So what I'm going to do, this was session 1 end. All right, that's because this was the end of session 1. So I'm going to press F12, and that lets me save as. And I'm going to go to my trilogy folder. I'm going to go into session 2, Excel 202, and I'm going to call it session 2 start. Session 2 start. Okay, we're going to hide these again, and there we go. Right, this VAT rate is, so this is a good point, guys. This went down 1 row. Why? Because we inserted a new row up there. So I can actually select these two. I can move my mouse cursor over the border of those 2 cells, and I can just pick it up and drag. All right, and it doesn't matter where I drag and drop these. If I move them down to row 3, you'll see that the VAT amount formula adjusts accordingly. So instead of K1 with the dollar signs, it's now K3 with the dollar signs, because it's intuitive. It knows that it needs to move with the input cell. All right. Now, it's something that is quite annoying, I'm sure, for you, for me, for all of us, is that you can't see the column headings here because the columns are not wide enough. So either we can widen all the columns by clicking over there, and we can double click between any of the 2 column letters. Alternatively, if I press Control Z to undo, what we could do is we could select all of these and we could wrap the text. All right, so we can actually select those and we can go to the Home tab. You can see I've actually hidden the ribbon. If your ribbon is hidden, you don't need to panic. All it means is that you can double click on one of the tabs and then it automatically displays the ribbon by default. But you'll see on my little computer screen over here, my little laptop, the ribbon actually takes up almost half of the screen. If you want more of the spreadsheet and less of the ribbon, you just hide the ribbon, and you can do that here with this drop down, and you can say full screen mode or show tabs only, or hide you've got multiple different options over here. And what you can do as well is you can just double click on one of the tabs and then it folds up or collapses the ribbon. Okay, but what was my point? My point over here is that we want to wrap the text. If we wrap text, what it does is it automatically extends the row height to handle and to accommodate the text that's in there. All right, and we might want to do the same thing here for VAT rate SA. We can wrap it, and there we go. All right, but Avi, you alluded to an automatic way to format our data. So what were you actually talking about there?
Good question. So we're going to introduce you guys to our first amazing new technique today. Reminder that everything up until now is what we did last week. So Dan obviously went quickly because it was just a recap, reminding you of what we did. So there's a possibility that you didn't recreate all of this in the time that Dan did it. I'm sure no one did. If you did, that's great. Let us know. But otherwise, what we're then going to do, we're going to go back to that original data. Okay. And we're going to convert this data in our data sheet at the bottom You can see at the bottom of Dan's screen, we've got data and we've got sheet 1. It's good to know that in Excel, you have sheets and you have books. So what is the difference between a workbook and a worksheet? It's quite an important thing to understand and appreciate. Any ideas? Well, I don't know if I've got a book here somewhere, but if you think of a book is the overall document, and inside of the book, you've got many sheets. That's the same in Excel. The workbook is the overall document, and at the bottom of your workbook, you can see on Dan's window, we've got many sheets at the moment, just 2. So you can have multiple sheets within a workbook. That's quite an important thing to note. So you may not have sheet 1 because you maybe weren't following along with Dan. It was just a recap. So now in our data sheet, we're going to convert this data into a table. What I'm thinking, Dan, I'm wondering, should we remove that formatting in row 1 or should we just leave it as is?
I think we can leave it as is. Yeah.
So let's leave it as is.
Yeah.
But typically, when you are going to convert your data into a something, which I'm about to show you, you'll see what it is when I show you. You don't have to do any of this formatting.
Okay, I've good point. I've actually got an idea. I think we should remove the formatting, and I think we should touch on cell styles.
Yeah.
That's a really nice one. And what we can do is we can actually show you over here. VAT rate SA is in a way a heading, and maybe it should be formatted in a way that just draws attention to it. It's an input next to it. That 15% is an input cell. So a way that we can show you to format something quickly and easily in a nice formatting is by using cell styles. So on the home tab, your cell styles might actually be a little bit bigger. It might be a bit more visual. In my case, it's a drop down. It says cell styles. So just look for the styles group on the home tab. And if you click there, then you'll see a whole lot of different cell styles. My text is oversized because I've actually changed the setting on my Excel to be font size 16 by default so that it's nice and big for my share screen. But what you'll see here is a whole lot of theme cell style, data and model styles. We're not going to get too carried away, but the point is, if you want to make this orange with white text, you click accent 2. There we go. So it's automatically filled it in with orange fill and put it in white text. And that's quite useful to know and to appreciate that you got your cell style there. And what we can do in order to remove the formatting of these headings is we can select them, or we can go to cell styles and we can just say, let's just be normal. Okay. We don't want to necessarily be abnormal. Let's just be normal. Let's just change them to normal cell styles. What it does is it takes away all the fill, the bold, the white, the wrap text, everything. It just goes back to normal formatting, unformatted.
Right. Yeah, so that's actually a very good thing to know. Thanks, Dan. If you've got some formatting that you don't like, you select it. Remember the 6th commandment from last week? Always select something before you do something. So Dan selected the headings from A1 to G1. He selected them. He went up to the home tab on the ribbon. He clicked on cell styles and he clicked on normal. And now, the other thing I want us to do before we convert to a something, I'm being vague intentionally because I want to build this up. I want to remove that freeze pane. Remember we did that last week. If you look closely on Dan's window, you'll see that there's that line in between rows 1 and 2. And you'll see why in the next couple of minutes, why I want to remove this, because we're not going to need it anymore. So at the moment, if Dan scrolls down, have a look at row 1. Can you see? You can always see the header. So that's very useful, obviously. Okay. So let's remove that. So how do we remove that? We're going to go up to the View tab on the ribbon, V-I-E-W, View, and we'll see that towards the right-hand side of the ribbon, you'll see in the window group, we discussed groups last week on the ribbon. You can see there's the Freeze Panes button. If we click on that, we can say unfreeze panes. Now you'll see that line in between rows 1 and 2 is gone.
And here you've got the frustration of scrolling down and not seeing your heading.
Okay. And the reason I'm doing that is because we've got a different solution to that problem. We don't need to click on view and then freeze panes and freeze top row with what we're about to show you. So now, guys, if you've just joined, you need to please make sure you download the data. We're going to resend it in the chat. So I do see 1 or 2 people have joined over the last few minutes. So let's just quickly reshare that. I'm going to share session 1 end.
Yeah, and Avi, this is actually a good opportunity for us to save as again, because remember we saved as session 2 start, but now we're actually in progress. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you again F12. Okay, what does F12 do? It opens up save as, and we're going to save this as session 2 in progress. Okay, let's be nice and descriptive so we know exactly, and anyone else knows what's going on with this file. Which file is this? This is session 2 in progress. We change the name, we save it, and there's no confusion whatsoever. So we have the start file, and then we've got the in progress file. All right. So Avi, you've been a little bit vague, but you've been hinting, you've been alluding to something. So what are we actually talking about?
Okay, so now we're about to do it. We're going to learn through doing, we're not going to learn through talking. So what I'd like everyone to do is to stand somewhere in the data. What does that mean? It means you can see like on Dan's screen, we're in cell F4, the intersection of column F and row 4, as we discussed last week. So it just need to be somewhere in the data. Dan, what does outside the data look like? Just in case anyone, that's outside the perimeter, outside the city walls. So you need to be inside somewhere in the data. It doesn't matter where. That's all you need to do. Just click on any one random cell in the data, and then I want you to hold down the control button, hold it down, and at the same time, press the letter T for Tango, or in this case, T for table. Now you can let go because Excel's done something. What did Excel do firstly? There's a little pop-up which has come up on your screen. It says create table. Where is the data for your table? Can you see that Excel automatically picked up where the data is? Can you see those marching ants, as they call them, going around the data? Those little ants marching around. Remember we said the city walls, so the ants are just marching around the perimeter of the city, of the data. That's good, meaning we didn't have to select the data. So in a way, we didn't follow the 6th commandment. We didn't have to select. We stood in the data, we said Control T, Excel picked up where the data is, and then look at that little tick box. It says my table has headers, and it is ticked. If for some reason yours is not ticked, you need to tick that box. Now what we can do, we can press enter. Wow, what happened? It's all changed. Can you guys see? So now, because no one can hear you, you don't have to be ashamed. I want everyone to go, ooh. Okay. Now, guys, if you've joined one of our previous Excel crash courses before, I know some of you might have seen this before. This is called as I mentioned, T for table. It is a table. Now, what does that mean? It's in a way like a real life table. A table holds things. You put things on a table. So in this case, the table is holding the data. So it's just a placeholder in a way. It's a place that your data is held. And I'm sure the first thing you will notice, guys, is that it looks very good. You agree? Before it was black and white, it was boring. And now it already looks a lot better. And I'm sure you guys agree, it was very easy. Do you guys agree with me? You can shake your head at your screen. We didn't have to go and program anything and spend 20 minutes formatting and doing the colors. It looks good from the outset. So that's great. So now what we're going to do over the next few minutes, we're going to just unpack some of the additional benefits and features of working in table mode. The first thing I actually want to show you is, remember earlier when we scrolled down, when we had removed freeze panes, we couldn't see the top row anymore. But now look closely at what happens when you're in the table. Remember, you have to be in the table. If Dan was somewhere in column I and he scrolled down, I don't think it should work. If you're in the table, you can see. If you're outside the table, you won't see this. But if you're in the table and you scroll down, can you see that the table headers, the number, the date, the month, the day of the week, etc., actually merges with the Excel column headings, meaning it's an automatic freeze panes. We didn't have to program it. That's another benefit of working in table mode, okay? Because it's very easy to know what your headers are as you scroll down. You don't have to program anything. So that's another benefit. Dan, what else is interesting about working in table mode that we can share with everyone?
Yeah, good question. So when you're actually standing inside your table, have a look here. We've actually got an additional tab on the ribbon. Okay, it's called Table Design, right? It actually looks green, where the other headings, the other tabs look black, which is interesting. And it goes away completely when we stand outside of our table. So that's point number one. If you're standing outside your table, the freeze pane doesn't work, and the extra tab is not there. So that's why, because it's contextual. So it appears when it's in context. So when you're standing on your table of data, then you get the additional features. All right. So this clicks into gear, and we've got table design. Now, what's on this table design tab? Well, it's a whole lot of features that are going to make our lives easier, that can help us to tweak some certain settings within our table and really get it to work for us. So the first thing that we notice when we're actually looking at our table visually is that it's formatted in such a way that the headings come up in white bold text with a blue fill, okay, which is very nice. All right, but you might not really like that. We also have these alternating blue and white stripes. They're called banded rows. How do I know they're called banded rows? Because I look up here and I see banded rows. It says display banded rows, in which even rows are formatted differently from odd rows. So let's touch on a few of these things. So if we untick banded rows, you can see the effect. The effect is such that it turns the blue and white alternating stripes on and off. I think somebody might be unmuted, but it's all good. Okay, so play around with that. Banded rows on and off. In a similar way, we've got banded columns. Now, you might really like that. This is entirely personal preference. Banded columns, you can turn it on and off. See the effect that it has. First column. Okay, what that does is it bolds the first column. Last column, it bolds the first column. Sorry, it bolds the last column. Okay, so we can untick those. Header row, that actually shows or hides the header row. All right, we'll get to total row in a moment. And we've got filter button. There's a tick box with filter button, so we can turn that on and off. Depending on your version of Excel, if you're on an older version of Excel, you won't have that filter button checkbox, but you can access the filter feature, okay, by going to data, the data tab, and you can turn the filter on and off there. So that's that funnel over there. All right, see it? Okay, once again, let's hide this. And we're going to go back to our table design tab, because I want to talk to you for a moment about blue. Let's talk about blue and white. Okay, you might not like it. So what you can do is you can hover your mouse cursor over these different styles over here, and you can see a preview of what it will look like if you use different styles. And it's not just these four. There are a whole lot of different styles. Okay, so you might like this. Blue headings and then gray and white alternating stripes. I know, because I've seen Avi's style over the years. He loves this orange table style medium 17, and it looks quite neat. It looks tidy, and there we go. It draws attention to the headings, the orange fill and the white bold text. We've got our filter buttons, which make it easy to sort and filter. We'll look at some of that. And then we got our gray and white alternating stripes, which is a bit more subtle than that, like blue and white. All right. And just a reminder that as you scroll down, you've got your automatic freeze panes. And you see your heading names over there, and you also see the sort and filter buttons. So they stay there. Remember, they go away when you stand outside of your table. All right, so guys, we've had a look at the table styles and also the table style options over here. And let's actually touch on the total row. If we hover our mouse cursor, and this is a theme throughout Excel, whenever we hover our mouse cursor over a specific button or feature, we get a little pop-up called the screen tip. So there's our screen tip. If there's a keyboard shortcut that's relevant, it actually shows us what the keyboard shortcut is. Isn't that nice? Control and Shift and P. Turn on or off the total row of the table. All right, so let's click it, or better yet, we can use our keyboard shortcut Control Shift T. And there we go. Our revenue, including VAT, is what, Avi? 35,025 cents. All right. On that note, we can start to hint about what's coming next. Once we have converted our data into a table, we start to look at the actual data inside that table. All right. And I mentioned now that our total is 35,000 Rand and 25 cents. But how do we even know that it's rands? And when we start getting big numbers, and hopefully our revenue just grows from strength to strength, and we start doing tens of thousands of Rand every day or hundreds of thousands, the numbers are going to get big, and it's going to get difficult to actually read those numbers easily unless we format our numbers. All right, so the next step for us now is going to be to use some keyboard shortcuts to format our numbers so they look professional, they look presentable, they formatted appropriately, and they tell the right story. But before we do that, just a reminder to save our work. Now, remember, we saved this file as session 2 in progress. So now we don't need to save as again. We can just keep saving this particular file, and we do that using Control and S. All right. If I want to get to the start of my spreadsheet or my table, I want to go to cell A1, I can press Control and Home. We showed you that last week. It's a good reminder. With our training with 202, we always build on what we covered in 101. With this session today, we're building on what we covered last week. And that's why we spent a bit of time going over, recapping what we did last week. We're using the same data set because we believe in that. We don't believe in teaching you in silos where it's completely disjointed and separate. We're stacking, we're building a foundation, a base, and then we're stacking new skills and techniques on top of that. And it gives you an opportunity to practice what you covered in the previous session. All right. All right, guys, so let's consolidate what we've done. We took the data, we removed the formatting, we removed the freeze panes, and then we converted it into a table with Control-T. We changed the table style to something a bit more appropriate. We had a look at all of these different tick boxes over here to see the effect that it has, and we saved our work. Avi.
Yeah, great. So 2 things I'd like to look at. Firstly, what are those little arrows, those little drop-down arrows, those buttons that we're seeing next to the column headings?
We touched on them a couple of minutes ago. We mentioned that those are sort and filter buttons.
Great. Sorry, because I saw Philip asked, I wasn't sure.
So let's, Avi, talk us through them.
Okay, great. So yeah, we can spend a little bit of time on that. But the nice thing is that it's automatically filtered. We've got our drop-down arrows over there where we can sort from A to Z. We can filter. So it's worthwhile playing around with that. Okay, so it's definitely worthwhile looking at that. And the nice thing though is that it's automatically there. Okay, if you don't want them, you can switch them off. Okay, how can you switch them off? There's that filter button over there on the table design tab, which again, you'll only see if you're in the table. You won't see that table design tab if you're outside the table.
And if you're on a recent version of Excel, that filter button, because on older versions of Excel, that filter button doesn't appear there, the tick box. So what you do is you go to the data tab and you go here. And when you hover over this button, which has that visual cue, that funnel, then what is the keyboard shortcut? It's Control, Shift, and L. And I think in this case that L stands for list because you're filtering a list.
Great. Now, what if we want to get back to wrapping our text in our column headings? Would that still work in table mode?
So good point, Avi, because what actually happened is that the columns were widened automatically. Did you notice that, Avi?
Yeah.
Because when we changed into table mode, we pressed Control-T and it widened day of the week to fit it in perfectly, and it actually fits in the heading and the button. Revenue X VAT, button. VAT amount, and then the button. It's actually widened them perfectly. You can see that the columns are different widths. But you might want them to all be a little bit narrower and to wrap the text. So we can touch on that for a moment. You can highlight or select all these headings, the orange cells, and go back to the Home tab, and we can click Wrap Text. It's actually not going to change anything. Why? Because they're already fitting. But if we want to select all the headings, what do? I take my mouse to where it says A. I get my mouse changing to the little down pointing arrow. I click and I drag to the right-hand side. I can then click and drag between any 2 of the column letters. I can drag, and let's say I want them to be 111 pixels. I click and I drop. There we go. But now it's actually not fitting.
No, that's how they are. Yeah. What basically happens is you have to press wrap text only when you actually need wrap text, meaning we pressed it when we didn't actually need it because the column widths were full. So what we'd have to do now is actually switch it off and switch it back on, and then it will work.
Okay, got you. So it's that button over there, wrap text, you unclick it and then you click it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. And what that means is then this becomes in view. VAT rate to say our input cell with our 15% becomes in view. So that's great. So Avi, now we've looked at table. We've looked at wrapping text again. Our data looks nice. It looks cleaner. It looks well formatted, but the numbers are still looking a little bit messy because they are general format. How do I know they're general? If I look at hiding this, if I look at the home tab and I look at the number group over here, I've got a drop down which says general, and you'll see here I've got general, then I've got number, I've got currency, accounting, and date, and all these different formats, and I've got more number formats. We can look at that just now. But for now, let's talk about a keyboard shortcut to select this column and to format it in rands and cents. So Avi, tell us about this shortcut to select the whole column.
Great. Well, why don't you guys tell us, because we did it quite a few times last week. I want to see if anyone remembers this. I'll give you a clue. It was the alien shortcut. Anyone remember?
Where the aliens go to drink.
Yeah. What was the shortcut for selecting a column? See if anyone remembers. Don't be shy. You can post it in the chat. It's also on your cheat sheet. Then if Dan's got it open there, we can have a look at the cheat sheet for that shortcut. It's quite a big one. It's got a big button there. It's the space bar. That's where the aliens go to drink. So control and the space bar. That's what we press. Dan would stand anywhere in column E, and then he press control space bar. That selects all the values in that column, which is great. So that's the sixth commandment, to select all the values before we format them. So we've now selected all those values with control space bar. And now what I'd like us to do is, if I'm just going to shift my camera here and show you. If you look on my laptop keyboard, can you see on top of the number 4? Can you see we've got the same as yours, guys? On top of your number 4, what symbol do you see there? The dollar. Okay, that represents currency. So that's a hint for us that that's the shortcut that we're going to use to convert to a currency format. So what do we need to press? Control and Shift at the same time, and that number 4. The number 4, which has the dollar on it, guys. If you press the number 4 on the right-hand side of a very large keyboard, it won't work because we need to see the dollar. So Control, Shift, and 4 will convert into a currency format. Okay, now I know there's 2 questions many of you might be asking, so I'm going to ask them on your behalf. Number 1, if you've got rands like us, you may have rands, but the format still might be a little bit different. There may not be that space between the thousands, and there may not be the decimal point, etc. Don't worry about that for now. That's just a basic computer setting. Think if you get rand, then that's good. Now, the second question some of you might be asking is, what if yours comes up with dollars? Does anyone have that? Otherwise, we can carry on. I don't have to discuss it. So if no one's telling me in the chat that they're seeing dollars, then that's fine. We'll carry on. I don't have to tell you why that sometimes happens. We'll give it another few seconds. Okay, good. Everyone's got rands. Okay, Jabulani, thank you. That's because your computer is a bit biased and it thinks you're in America. Okay, it's obviously a bit confused. So that's a computer setting. It's not an Excel setting. Okay, you need to go, and you can maybe Google it. You need to go and change your computer's regional settings to South Africa. So you can Google that. Just Google change my computer's region setting to South Africa. You basically go to the, I don't go into too much detail, but just change your computer's regional settings to South Africa. And then when you use the currency shortcut, it will convert into rands. Now, guys, let's go back to column, let's go to column B and let's play around with that, because currently is in a date format. But let's say it wasn't in a date format and we want to get the values in column B, the dates in column B, into a date format. So step 1 again is we're going to follow the sixth commandment. Now, if you weren't here last week, I'd recommend watching the recording because there's quite a few fundamental things that we did last week that we're not doing this week. But the 6th commandment is to always select something before you do something. It's very important. So now, if we want to format all of these dates, we first need to select them. So we've pressed Control Space Bar. And now, what I'd actually like to do quickly before we do it is if Dan can just flick over to that cheat sheet, I want to show you something quite useful when it comes to formatting. So right at the bottom of that page 1, first page of the PDF with the cheat sheets, which is in that downloads folder, which I'll repost into the chat again. If you came a bit late, you do have this as a download. Can you see at the bottom there, there's actually 6 combinations that we are showing you. There's Control Shift and Squiggle, which is on top or the far left-hand side underneath the escape button. That will convert to a general format. The next one will be a number format. Control Shift and 1. We'll go in Excel now and see what these all look like. The next one would be time. If you ever want to work with time in Excel, you can use Control Shift and 2. And you can see the next one, Control Shift and 3, which has the hash symbol on, will convert to a date. The next one, Control Shift and 4, would be currency, and then Control Shift and 5 would be percentage. So remember, we just did Control Shift and 4, which is currency. So now if we can flick back into our Excel screen, let's go try those out. So now, as I say, we've selected all the values there in the column B. Okay, absolutely, Karen or Karen, you can, but it's not beyond the scope right now. There is a way to do different types of formatting and custom format. We do go into that in more detail in our Excel 101 course. As mentioned, at the end of this trilogy, we're going to let you know about enrolling in our full Excel courses if you want. So we can discuss that at the end of next week's session. So for now, we're just going to, in a way, accept the default format that Excel gives us, even though there obviously are ways to change it. So we're going to now, we're in column B, we've selected all the values, Control Spacebar. Let's start with the left, and let's go through all the combinations that we just saw on the cheat sheet. So let's try Control Shift and Squiggle. That was the first one. That goes to what we call a general format. Basically means unformatted. Okay, by default, and you guys might have seen this before, it's quite important to note, if you see a list of numbers that look like that, okay, the 44,000s or so, those are dates. They're unformatted dates. Basically because Excel has a system where each date in Excel is represented by a particular number. Can you see? 44810, 44,810 was last week, whatever that date was the 7th or whatever, 6th or 7th of September. And then those are dates in Excel. So meaning that would be the first sign that those are dates and we need to convert them into dates from a formatting perspective. Formatting is what it looks like. It needs to be displayed as a date. That's really the appearance. Okay, let's try the next one. Control Shift and 1 will be a number format. This might be nice if you're working in accounts and you want to display it as a number without any specific currency. Okay, Dan
seems to have jammed a bit. Let me just make sure I'm saving my work here. All right, there we go.
Control Shift 2 seems to be.
Yeah, Control Shift 1 and 2 don't seem to be working. So Control Shift Squiggle, that's interesting that it doesn't want to work there. There might be some conflict with a shortcut. So Control Shift 4 is working. Control Shift 3 is working. But I mean, interestingly, if we just touch on this for a moment, my dates look different now. I've just done Control Shift 3, and that once again is coming up like that because of a setting on my computer. So it's putting it into a date format, but this is the default date format where it's showing the number, the day of the month, then the first 3 letters of the name of the month, and then the year just with 2 digits. Okay. So don't get too phased with that, but remember you can always customize your date form or your number format. If you click on this drop down list, you've got short date and long date, and you've even got more number formats. So let's go in there just for a moment, just to show you that this gives you even more number formats. So play around with it. In this case, custom D means day, M means month, Y means year, and you've got a whole lot of categories down the left-hand side. So if you want it to be back in this short date format, there we go. So that's quite strange. I'll look into why my Control Shift 1 and Control Shift 2 are not working, but let's not get too sidetracked. We still have quite a lot to cover. We also want to take a couple of minutes for a comfort break, just in a few seconds time. But let's just finish this chapter. Let's just talk about, continue dealing with what we've been doing. I'm just going to press Control Space Bar, another opportunity to practice. I'm going to do it on column A because I want to show you these numbers are from 1 to 30. They're general number format. By the way, when I select a whole bunch of cells, I get this summary over here. I get average 15.5, count how many are there, there's 30, and what is the total? The sum is 465. Okay, so that's really good and useful to have a look at this bar at the bottom where it shows you a summary. And we can press Control Shift 5, and you'll see that is working. That changes it into percentage format. So this makes no sense to me now to have it like this, but it's good to know that if you want to change numbers into percentage, you press Control Shift and percent. And Excel actually reminds you of that when you hover over the percentage symbol. There it is, Control Shift percent. I can go back to general by pressing Control Shift squiggle, and I can format columns F and G, and then we're going to have a break. Columns F and G, and this is a nice little addition to Control Space Bar where the aliens go to drink on column F. If we want to save a bit of time and we want to extend the selection to column G, then we press Shift and the right arrow key, and now we've got both columns selected. We've got column F selected and column G selected, and we can press Control Shift 4, and it puts it into currency format, both of those columns. So now everything is formatted neatly. By the way, if you don't want decimal places, you can click on this button which says decrease decimal, and it will just go to rands with no cents. But in our case, we'll leave the cents because the cents are relevant. Clearly, we have different cents values, and we can save our work with Control S. The time is 9:58. We are going to get cracking. We're going to have a bit of a break, and we're going to get started at 10:02. So let's have a 4-minute break. Take it easy, go to the loo, go get yourself something to drink, have a stretch, and we'll see you back here in 4 minutes at 10:02. All right, welcome back. I'm assuming that you are now comfortable after your comfort break, and we are going to share our screen once again. All right, so here we are. Remember, we are saving our work consistently. All right, and let's just do about a 30-second recap. What have we done today? We've converted our data into a table. We used Control-T. We looked at some of the styles and settings when we are in table mode. We saw how table mode makes our lives easier. Everything looks good. It freezes the pane automatically, and it holds our data. And then we looked at formatting our numbers. All right, we looked at some of those different shortcuts on our cheat sheet. We looked at quite a few of these shortcuts, and we looked at Control Shift Squiggle, or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. All right, so play around with those. We also looked at Alt Tab to toggle between windows. We looked at hiding our, if we say show tabs only, there we go, it collapses the ribbon. That gives us more space to actually work with in our spreadsheet. So Abby, I think we were talking about what's next, and I think that it is really nice to actually show you how to format numbers in our table, in our data, based on the value. So we've got over here 1,000, then 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. So clearly there's a trend over here, and it gets bigger and bigger, which is great. I mean, if we're in a business where our revenue is increasing like this every single day, that's fantastic. Now, this is not practical. Obviously, that in practice, it's going to be much more random, but this is just for illustration purposes. We can pretend that our revenue is going up consistently every single day. And if we want to visually highlight the trend, a great way to do this is not to do it manually by selecting and saying this is red, and then it gets, if we think of red, orange, yellow, green, that kind of trend, then we don't want to do that manually, because that's going to take us a whole lot of time, and it's not going to be dynamic, it's going to be very inefficient. So the really efficient and smart way to do this is, firstly, to select the entire column. Once again, the sixth commandment that Avi mentioned, to select our data before we do anything to it. All right, so we press Control Spacebar. Then we go to the Home tab, and you can see, because I've collapsed the ribbon, I need to click on the Home tab to temporarily display what's on the Home tab. And I navigate over here, and earlier we showed you cell styles. This is the format as table. We did that using Control-T. And then just above that is conditional formatting. And you can see here that the fourth option on the list is color scales. This is really convenient. It's got some ready-made color scales, and when we hover our mouse cursor over it, have a look here. Green, yellow, red color scale. It's a color gradient, and the color indicates where each cell value falls within that range. And there you can see the preview that it goes red, then orange, then yellow, and it's graded. And if we hover to the next one, we can see it's the opposite. It's red, yellow, green. There it's green, white, red. So you've got a whole lot of different options here. Blue, white, red, white, blue, etc., etc. We're just going to go and keep it simple. We're going to click on the first one, and it's got red, yellow, green. And essentially, the lowest values are red, the highest values are green, and then it grades it in between. So isn't that nice? We've got red grading down to orange, then into yellow, then into like a lime green, and then eventually into green. Right. So this is a fantastic way to get Excel to do the work for us. And remember what Tracy said in the introduction about the fact that we're visual, and the more visual we can make our data and our work, the better, because it starts to tell a story. Instead of just seeing digits and numbers like the matrix, we're actually starting to see the story behind the data. And we touched on earlier the fact that we get our sort and filter buttons. And this is the great opportunity here to actually show you what happens if we sort this data, because at the moment it's going from smallest to largest. We could reverse the order by saying largest to smallest, and you'll notice that it changes everything. Here we've got 1, 2, 3, etc. We've got the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th of September. And if we go and we sort this column from largest to smallest, what does it do? It reverses the order of all the data. So instead of going in ascending or increasing order, we now have it going from 30 downwards. We got it from the 17th of October going backwards. we've got it going backwards in days, and we've got these numbers going from largest to smallest, and the gradient has reversed. We've got green, yellow, orange, and red. Okay, so I can undo that, Control Z, a very useful shortcut to know and to use and to repeat and to make habit. The opposite of Control Z is actually Control Y. We can redo what we just undid. All right, so you can press Control Y if you want to redo what we've just undone. Okay, so guys, what have we done? Remember, we converted it to table. We then showed you the shortcuts to format the numbers, and now we're doing conditional formatting, and it's called that. Why? Why is it called conditional formatting? Because it's not just ordinary formatting that we've already shown you today. This is conditional. It depends on the certain conditions that we specify. And in our full Excel 202 course, we go into much more depth with more examples and more use cases of conditional formatting. All right, conditional formatting, we've just touched the surface here. It's a great tool also because it's not very technical. Okay, we just had to select cell and click a few buttons. We just have to know that the tool is there, and we didn't have to program any very complicated scientific formulas or anything like that. Avi?
Yeah, what I was thinking, what about filtering based on a color? We touched on the sort and filtering earlier.
Ah, very nice.
It's quite a useful thing to note. If you've got this type of conditional formatting with these colors in your data, you can actually filter to only see a particular color. So now that's obviously quite difficult because it's quite, but if you go, you actually, I think if you go filter by color and you say more cell colors, then then you can say, well, what if I just want to see, a particular color in the middle or whatever. So you'd have to obviously know your colors very well there, but that's just something useful to note. In Excel, Excel 202, we go into a bit more detail, and for example, we've got a huge database, and we just we do conditional formatting to maybe just show you 2 or 3 different types of colors. And in that case, it's quite useful if you just want to see green, or just want to see red, or just want to see yellow.
Yeah,
it's quite useful to filter based on the color.
Absolutely. And Avi, I'm glad you mentioned filtering, because let's touch on for a few moments the different types of filters that we can do in some of these columns. So if we go just to the left of the revenue column, we've got day of the week. And if you click there, you'll notice that what it's done is it's given us the 5 weekdays. So if you want to see only the Fridays, you can deselect all. So you just tick that button over there, that checkbox. So it deselect all these options, and we want to see Friday only. So we go and we select Friday, and we see that there are 6 Fridays. And notice that what it's done is it's actually filtered and adjusted the total accordingly, which is great, because if you actually have a look at this total value over here, the total cell, you'll see that the formula is not equals sum that you might have expected. It's actually programmed it as a subtotal function. We're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. We're not going to get carried away for the purposes of this session. The important thing to note is that Excel is smart, and what it's doing is it's preempting the fact that when we filter the data, the total must also filter. If it had been a sum, it would add up the stuff that you can see and the stuff that you can't see. But in this case, what it's done is it's displaying the total for the cells, only the cells that are visually displayed. So if we select these 6 cells, you'll see that the sum over here, remember I showed you that summary in the bar at the bottom, 7,006.95. You'll also notice that it hasn't been formatted in currency format, and that's because when we press Control Spacebar, it selects only the data in the table, not including the heading or the total row. If we press Control Spacebar once more, it includes the heading and it includes the total row. If we pressed it once more, it would go all the way down to over 1 million, which is the number of cells in a sheet in Excel. Another nice thing about what we've just done with filtering this is it's showing you the red, the orange, the yellow, the lime green, the slightly darker green. So those are the six of the colors, and there you can see very clearly the change. And what we can do is we can format this cell as well. That's another opportunity to practice our Control Shift and 4. And I think Abby wanted to add something here.
Yeah, something interesting to note. I don't know if anyone else noticed this. If we go to that filter button for day of the week, you'll notice that it looked a little bit off. If we just make that display a bit bigger in the bottom right there, You'll see Friday, Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's actually because Excel's rolling out a trial phase, because in certain Scandinavian countries, they're thinking of changing the order of the days of the week to Friday, Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay, that is a joke. Why are they in that order? It's because Excel doesn't actually know that those are specifically days of the week. They list it in alphabetical order. It's interesting to note, Excel doesn't actually know that those are days of the week in terms of a date. They're just words in Excel's mind, because interestingly, what you'll see now, if we go to the filter button for column B, where there's dates, check how cool this is. You notice something different, guys. When you've got dates and you've got filter buttons, Excel will automatically group them, which is great. We've got thousands of dates, and you want to filter, let's say, just to see October from a certain year or whatever. That's very, very useful. Okay, so now we filtered to see Fridays, and only just within October, so that's quite nifty and quite useful. And it's also an important thing to note, because if you're dealing with data, and it's very common, this, by the way, if you're dealing with data in your context, your job or your role, whatever you're doing with your Excel, if you have dates and you've converted to a table like we told you, and then you go to the filter button, and if those dates are not grouped, that means that those are actually not valid dates in Excel. Excel's not picking them up as dates, and there is a way to remedy that. We're not going to show you that today, but we do cover that in our Excel 202 course, dealing with invalid dates. And as I say, the one sign of an invalid date is if they are not grouped, like you can see on our screen over here. All right, so we've got just over 15 minutes left. And what I think I'd like us to look at next, now that we've looked and got a taste for some conditional formatting, is I want to look at doing some data manipulation. So, Dan, what if we want all our months in the shorthand version to rather all be in uppercase? Maybe just look, for our purposes in our business, that's how we want it to be displayed. We want October and September, the months that we've got in our data. We don't want it to be like it is at the moment, first letter capital and the rest lower. We want all of those letters to be in an uppercase. Now that's quite useful, because what we're going to show you, I think, is quite relevant, because very often when you're dealing with text in Excel, maybe people's names or full names, it can be a big mess. Uppercase, lowercase, a bit of everything, a bit of a jumble. So what I'm going to ask Dan is, I remember once in Word, you got that magic button where you can just click on it and it changes it to uppercase and lowercase. Does that exist in Excel, that button?
Absolutely. So Avi, we're going to get there in a moment, but just to take a step back for a moment, we have filtered our data. So what we want to do is we want to actually unfilter. It's important to know how to get rid of the filter. So let's just touch on this for a moment, and then we're going to go to Word, and then we're going to look at changing the case. So before we unfilter, there are visual clues that you have filtered your data. Number one, you see only 2 lines, right? So that's the obvious one. You don't see your 30 lines of data, you see 2 lines. Number 2 is you see a little funnel in that button over there. And when you hover your mouse cursor, you see it says day of the week equals Friday. When you hover your mouse cursor over there, you see date equals 2022 October. And what you can do is you can clear the filter from the date. So it removes the filter from that particular column, or I can undo that. Okay. We can clear the filters from all the columns in one go, which will be quite convenient. If we go to the data tab and we unclick on this filter button, or on the table design tab, we can just uncheck that if we've got this on our version of Excel. All right, we can filter, and it actually doesn't work. It doesn't help to clear the filter from the entire data set. Avi wants to add something. What I was going to do is Control-Shift-L, which should cancel the filter and then reapply the filter button.
Brilliant. Yeah, we can do that. And the reason I want to mention what I'm about to mention is because this is actually the setting that I've got on my Excel. Now, because we're such big believers in working in table mode, whenever I'm in Excel, I've got tables, which means I've always got filter buttons. And very often, I want to clear my filters like we want to do now. So what I actually did, and it's quite a nifty thing that I'd like us to show you, if we go up to the data tab on the ribbon, and we right click on that clear filter button that Dan showed us earlier with that little X. And that first option in the list, can you see it says add to quick access toolbar? Let's see what happens if we click on that.
Okay, I'm going to show the full ribbon. Always show the ribbon. There we go.
Okay, great. So now, depending on your version of Excel, this is one of the most recent changes in Excel. The quick access toolbar is now under the ribbon. But if you're on a slightly older version, your quick access toolbar might be on the top, which means if you just did what we did, you'll see that little symbol with the filter with the X. You'll see it somewhere on the top of your screen. And the nice thing about that is no matter which tab you're on the ribbon, you can always just click on that button.
Here we go.
Okay, you click on it, clears the filters, nice and easy. You don't always have to go to the data tab, so you've fixed it onto the quick access toolbar. In our Excel 101 course, we show you an even quicker way to do that, which you're not going to look at now. That's called the magic Alt key. What we are going to do now is, as I mentioned, we're just going to spend the last 12 minutes or so looking at doing some data manipulation, which is quite nifty. So as I mentioned, maybe we can quickly flick into Word just for 30 seconds to show you what I was referring to. If we type in my name or Dan's name or whatever, and we want to change that to be in a proper case where it's how you'd normally see a full name with the first letter upper and the rest lower. So what do? We select it like the sixth commandment also applies over here. We go up to the home tab on the ribbon. Now, what's nice is you've also got the home tab in Word, same like in Excel, and you'll see that there's that button just next to that red letter A for font. You'll see it over there. There is a button in Word to change the case to a sentence case, a lowercase. It should, I don't know if it gives you a preview or not, but you can play around with that. So in this case, we would want to capitalize each word, the fourth option. Okay, so now the question is, as some people often ask and wonder, do we have this same button in Excel? The answer is, unfortunately not. It didn't design it that way. There's no magic button like that. But what there is there the ability to use a function. What is a function? Don't worry, maybe it's just a fancy word. It is an automatic type of formula in Excel. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the sum function, equals sum, and you can add things up. So this is going to be a function called equals upper. And it's easy to remember because upper stands for everything uppercase. So there's a function called equals upper. There's also one called lower, and there's one called proper. You can write that down if you want to remember them. Upper will change everything into an uppercase. Lower will do everything as lower, and proper will do first letter upper and the rest lower. So now that I've told you in theory, so this is all very nice in theory. There's a function called upper. What do we actually do? And that's why we're going to spend some time showing you the methodology, how to manipulate your data. So step one, let me ask you guys this, or you can at least think about it. You're welcome to post in the chat. Where would you type in this equals upper? Because remember, when you're typing in a formula, you actually have to type it in somewhere. So you can't go into column C and type top of it. Doesn't work. You need to be somewhere where there currently isn't any data. You need to be somewhere blank, in a blank column, in a blank cell, in an empty cell. So the way we recommend doing that is as follows. So follow through with us. We're going to stand anywhere in column D. Okay, it doesn't matter where we are, as long as we're somewhere in column D. We're going to say control spacebar. We're actually going to say control spacebar again, because that will keep the integrity of the column widths if we do it while selecting the column heading as well. And we've done this quite a few times today, control spacebar, we just pressed it an extra time. We then are going to say control shift and equals to insert a new column. And what we're going to call it is, maybe you can do month, but all in capitals. So like that symbolizes month, but in an uppercase. What do you notice happened there? It says month 2. Why? Because when you're in table mode, you can't have 2 column headings with the same name. Okay, I'm going to go into the reasoning why. You just can't. Okay, so now that we've got somewhere to work, we need a blank canvas, we need space to do our manipulation. We now can stand anywhere in column D. Doesn't matter where we are. You can even just to see that it still works. If Dan stays in row 3, you can go to row 4 if you want. It'll still work the same. Doesn't matter. You can be in any row as long as you're in column D, this new blank column we've just inserted. Now, as I mentioned, guys, every single function in Excel and formula, in this case, we're doing a function, similar principles, formula and function are similar. Any function in Excel will start off with an equal sign. So we're going to go anywhere into that column and we're going to type in an equal sign. That's step 1. Well done. You were on our way. Step 2 is to type in the function name. If you know it, you can start typing it in with the keyboard. PRO. We don't even have to type in the full one because we'll start seeing.
Are we doing proper?
Sorry, upper. Apologies. We could do proper, but it already is in proper. My apologies. We're going to do upper. So we're going to type in U and then P. We don't actually have to type in anything further because it's now narrowed it down. So you'll see Dan presses backspace. There were a few other functions which had U in it. But now once we had pressed UP, it singled it out. And now we can see the function that we want is in blue. There's a little, we might have actually, I only realized now we might have lost a few people with the load shedding. I didn't realize, but obviously this is being recorded and you're welcome to, and you might be watching this recording. So you can see a little preview there or a little description of what the function does. It will convert a text string to all uppercase letters. Great. So now, here's the $1 million question. What do we now press if we want to select that blue function, the upper function in blue? Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're probably thinking we should press enter. Unfortunately, I want us to press enter because what enter does, it does exactly what the button says. It enters in your data. But let me ask you this, were we ready to enter in the data? Yeah, we're going to be done by 10:30, no problem. If you enter in, all we had typed in was equals UP. So we entered in equals UP. Excel got confused. It says hashtag name. So it's an error. Didn't work. Do not press enter until you are ready to enter in your data. So in this case, we're going to press Control Z to undo. Okay. We can double click on that cell or we can press F2 or Fn plus F2, depending on your laptop. So now we're going to carry on. We can press the backspace and press UP again. I'll tell you what you can do. You can either double click on upper with your mouse, or you can press tab to auto complete the function name. So now we've got an equal sign. We got the word upper and we got an open bracket. That's the notation for working with functions. An equal sign, function name, and brackets. And then something inside the brackets. I'm sure you guys can see where we're going with this. Inside the brackets, we need to select the cell directly to the left of where we are. Say that again. We select the cell directly to the left of where we are. We can use our mouse. When working in table mode, you do not see the typical cell references like C3 that you would normally have seen now. Don't worry about this. You didn't have to manually program it. I know there's a little at symbol there.
By the way, you will see the typical reference if you're not in the same row. And that's an important point. If we go upper cell, it says C2. If we go down a few cells, you can see that the reference is there. But as soon as we're in the relevant row, it labels that reference because it knows that we're dealing with something that's relevant to this particular function that we're building. So it's got upper and then at, the at symbol and month, which means we're talking about the month field. We can just press enter, but it's better to actually be in a good habit of closing the brackets and then pressing enter.
Okay, now, brilliant, guys. Now, 2 important things that we want to notice and pay attention to. Number 1, it converted SEP with uppercase and then lowercase into all uppercase. So great, upper function has worked brilliantly. But also has happened is it's done it for the entire column, which is great. Because we didn't have to copy it down or double click like we did, remember last week, the 1 and the 2, and you double click. In this case, you just do it once when you're building a formula or a function when you're in table mode, and it will auto-populate the entire column. Good. So guys, that is the upper function we insert to the column. As mentioned, when you're doing this type of manipulation, you could also use lower if you want. I typically use lower when I've got a whole lot of email addresses. It looks a lot neater when they're all in lowercase. There's also proper, okay, where it will convert it to what it currently looks like in column C, first letter upper and the rest in lowercase. So that is something really useful to keep in mind.
Yeah.
We do have about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I mean, just on the subject of upper, lower, and proper, maybe what we can show you is you could do the exact same thing. You would follow the same steps to create the lower function, which would put it all in lowercase. But it's nice to know that you can actually just come in here and edit what we've already got. So you go into the formula bar or into the cell itself. In this case, we're in the formula bar. You can just edit a specific part. You can come in here like a surgeon. You work very accurately. You select a particular part that you want to change. You highlight the letters that we're going to get rid of, and you can press delete or backspace to get rid of that and then type, or you can just start typing, because if you've selected and then you start typing, it overwrites it. We can say LOW, there it is. I'm just going to complete it. You can see I'm typing in lower letters. Ironic. Okay, it's okay. You can do it in lower or uppercase letters. The point is that the letters are right. But lower, we press enter, and there we go. You can see the effect that it has. It changes the entire column once again. It saves us a lot of time. It prevents errors, and you'll see that there's this little pop-up autocorrect options, and it's automatically calculating the entire column. We could undo that or stop automatically creating calculator columns. I wouldn't want to stop that. It's a great feature that I particularly like, that it preempts it and it helps me to work smarter. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save with Control S. Now, guys, it's 10:29. We respect your time. We know a number of you need to end at 10:30. We also have other commitments coming up. What we're going to do is we're going to say thank you to the team at AutoJet. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to say thank you to each of you for being here, for playing along with us, for participating, for getting your hands dirty, and for being good sports. We are also going to say we will see you next week. There's a separate link for next week. Make sure to register. That is going to be a continuation of today. We're going to look at more skills and technique. We're going to do some more stuff from 202, including VLOOKUP and pivot tables, and we're going to go into macros. We're going to show you how a macro works. What is it? How does it work? How do we record a macro? How do we help? How do we use macros to help to automate and streamline our work and take our Excel power to the next level? So we look forward to seeing you same time and same place, although we won't be in Cape Town still. We'll be back in Joburg, but it'll be the same time next Tuesday. So Tracy and to everyone, thank you once again. Pop out the message in the chat. Let us know what your favorite part of today's session was. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you next week. Tracy, over to you.
Dan, Avi.